Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Erik and Derek, Tiger Football Talk. We're just two Clemson grads who love nothing more than to talk a little bit more about Clemson football each week. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus since the Sugar Bowl mishap is what we're going to call it. So we've enjoyed the last few weeks off, and we wanted some time to really look back at this season, be emotionally distant from it, and look back and really answer one important question that, to be honest, I think a lot of Clemson fans are asking themselves today, which is, was the 2020 season a success for the Clemson Tigers?
The 2020 season. COVID. It was a COVID season, and it's finally over. We're in 2021. Oh, wait. Still happening. But
nothing changed, yeah.
Yeah. Happy New Year, everyone. Looking back on the 2020 season for the Clemson Tigers, it came in with high hopes, right? Trevor Lawrence coming back, ETN deciding to forego the draft and come back for his senior year. Two heavy hitters, Trevor Lawrence with one loss in his Clemson history, being the national championship the year prior to LSU. We were coming into this season being like, we're punching our ticket to the national championship and we'll see whoever it is there. Obviously with COVID and everything surrounding this season, it was a tough one. I mean, we didn't get the spring practice that we wanted. We really didn't get the practice we needed during the season with all the COVID issues, having different people having to quarantine or split snap counts with the first team. But at the end of the day, we went 10-2. 10-2. And one of those losses was without Trevor Lawrence, and both of those losses were to top four teams. Look, at the end of the day, this was a rebuilding year. You look at this team, and we have a lot of young talent. It's sad to see Trevor and ETN go on this note, but super proud of our boys, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen next season.
Yeah, it's weird to say rebuilding when we have ETN and we have Trevor Lawrence. And originally at the beginning of the year, I thought that was an advantage for Clemson because we had continuity when, if you looked at some of the other top teams, they didn't necessarily have continuity at the quarterback, the running back, and the wide receiver position. Unfortunately, we lost so many wide receivers, and you see Alabama, be able to replace Jalen Waddle with Devontae Smith and just keep on trucking. And Clemson just was losing traction seemingly all year long when we were trying to do that. But looking at it, based on who I've talked to, what I've seen in the media, there's really three big areas that Clemson fans are kind of focusing on from this past season. And so I kind of want to do a deep dive on each and every single one of them, which is, for the first time since 2017, when we lost to Syracuse, Clemson lost an ACC game. What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think for any team in the college football era right now, it's hard to go undefeated. I mean, I know that the playoff system is really kind of gearing towards those undefeated, or you have to have one loss but a really good resume, two loss if everyone else messes up. But at the end of the day, I don't care what you say about the conferences, Big Ten, Pac-12, SEC, ACC, it is hard to go undefeated. It just is. I mean, you look at this year and there was, two undefeated teams going into the finals, and one of them only played 9 games all year. Yeah. So I think it'd be hard to say to get through a schedule like that undefeated. And our one loss in the ACC was to a top 4 team with our backup quarterback that went to double overtime. To me, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nail-biter game that we had a chance to win, and we did not lose it because of DJ Uiagalelei. He played a great game just like he did the week before. It was we had a ton of starters that were out in that game. Most of the time we were able to overcome, but we came against a very well-coached Notre Dame team. But still, with the team that we had and the prevailing sentiment was even without Trevor Lawrence and without those starters, we were still expected to win that game. So, all streaks must come to an end. We still hold the longest record for the ACC home game streak. We haven't lost since Pittsburgh, I believe, 2016. So we still have that intact, and still that record is continuing. But it had the opportunity to derail us from getting to a national championship or getting to the college football playoff. And so kudos to the team for rebounding and later on that year in order to go to the ACC championship game and win it. But it pushed us closer to an uneasy feeling that Clemson fans have not felt in a long time.
I mean, looking back on this year, and specifically that game, that big loss at Notre Dame for us, it kind of goes back to my original point of I'm so excited for next year. What that loss brought for us was a number 4 team on the road at Notre Dame, a place that Dabo has never coached and played in. And we got to start DJ Uiagalelei and all of our freshmen, Brian Brisset, Miles Murphy, EJ Williams. Like, we got these guys on the field in that scenario. We went to double overtime. It was a heartbreaking loss. But that experience that these players got, that they can take that into next year, is something that Clemson does better than any program, which is get players to play, especially when they're young, and they get those experiences early, and they're valuable. So next season, when they're just sophomores and they're still young to this game, when we get into these big games, there's no worry anymore. They've done it. They've done it before, and I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at our team going into the AC Championship game, we had obviously revenge factor on the mind. We had Tyler Davis being able to play, James Kowski being able to play, Trevor Lawrence being able to play, and the team coming out performing at an incredibly high level, shutting down Ian Book, shutting down Williams, and just the entire offense of Notre Dame, and then our offense clicking with some pretty aggressive play calling. So we had that revenge factor to come out and win. I think it's the 6th straight ACC championship, which is a record for a Power 5 conference. And on the flip side, the next question I want to get to is somebody else who had revenge on their minds, but it wasn't the Clemson Tigers. It was Ohio State. We saw the mantra, when the game was starting of Justin Fields working out, pushing that big tire over, and in the background was the losing score from last year, where they thought they were going to win it, and just a miscommunication with the wide receiver. Nolan Turner comes up with the interception, seals it. They don't get the opportunity to come back. That seals the game. So going into this one, what were your thoughts on how that sits with us today? It's been 3 weeks since it happened. What are your thoughts on that game?
Look, it was a blowout loss for Clemson, and it's been a while. I mean, I think all the way back to the West Virginia game, I think that was kind of a lot of the feeling for the Clemson fans watching this Ohio State game, was that blowout loss. I mean, we haven't experienced a blowout loss in a long time where the defense wasn't clicking and the offense wasn't clicking. It was kind of a perfect storm situation. Ohio State came in ready to win that game. Clemson came in without Tony Elliott, which I think, as much as, Streeter came in and called a good play, they orchestrated a bunch of good drives. I think he did the best job that he could have under the scenario. But again, with COVID, it was just a weird year. It was a very disjointed year where you didn't have that common thread throughout the season. And even when these, with Trevor out, or with Skalski out, or with Tony Elliott not coaching, it just changes the game in a way where when Trevor doesn't have Tony in his ear, it's just different. And on the flip side, Ohio State came out to play. Justin Fields, kudos to him. I hope in the NFL he shows as good as he has in college. He's an incredible player. Olave, no one can guard him. I mean, it was an incredible game from Ohio State. Brent Venables got exposed, and I'm curious to see how we deal with that moving forward.
Yeah, Justin Fields, he did not lock up the number 2 quarterback position. Zach Wilson's getting a lot of credit as well, but he made himself quite a bit of money, I believe, in that one particular game, because you get to see the ceiling of a truly tremendous quarterback that is Justin Fields. But where is his floor? That's the really question mark. You look at him through most of the season, even against Alabama, he didn't have that great of a year. And against Clemson, he was dialed in. So again, you get to see the ceiling of what he's capable of doing. He didn't really show that consistency, and that's why he's not in contention for number 1. Maybe some other years he would have been, but it's not really close at this point. He's just in contention for number 2. And Trevor Lawrence, crazy, like, he had a good game. It was wild. And Nick Saban even talked about this, like, great defense is getting slaughtered by great offense. And I'm not necessarily saying our defense was a great defense. When you can't stop the run and you can't stop the pass, listen, you're just in for a very, very long night. You mentioned the West Virginia game, and other people are like, wait, you guys lost to LSU last year by double-digit points. It's like, yeah, but we were in that game at halftime. We were neck and neck with them. They were just hitting perfect passes against really tight coverage, and we're like, okay, we showed that up. We're good. They weren't running all over us. Ohio State felt like they could have run every down, thrown every down, done whatever they wanted to, and just were able to control the game. And we have not been controlled since that West Virginia Orange Bowl game back in 12, 11, something like that. So it was just an unusual feeling, and hopefully one that Clemson doesn't get used to anytime soon.
Yeah, and I look back on this season and a bunch of the videos and pre-games and recaps that we've done, and I was very hard on Tony Elliott this year because I really felt like we had a lot of components to our offense with the ETNs, with the Galloways and tight ends, and even with our young wide receivers with Amari, and I just never felt like we got that mojo and we got it going, and I kind of placed a lot of that blame on Tony Elliott because there were so many times when he'd come up with these excellent plays. And I'm like, there it is. There's the flash of genius that I want throughout the game. And then watching this Ohio State loss without Tony Elliott, it made me think a little bit and kind of like reflecting on 2020. I'm curious how much our young O-line, with only one returning starter of Jackson Carman, and our inability to run block or pass block. I mean, that was really shown in the championship game and down the stretch. I'm curious how much that truly affected the rest of the game. I mean, was Tony Elliott not able to call the plays that he wanted just because we didn't feel like the position groups were there to actually facilitate those plays? And with Streeter calling that Ohio State game, you really saw more of those flaws in our offense. So I have to give Tony Elliott credit because he actually did a really good job throughout the season of allowing our offense to function with maybe some issues that we had specifically on O-line. And I'm hoping that throughout the years coming forward that Dabo can fix this and we can look back on a lot of this film and kind of move forward from this with mainly our coaching staff still intact.
Yeah, and I think we have some very talented offensive linemen who are young. Walker is one of them. I think he's going to be fantastic, a 4-star recruit. But we're going to need some younger guys to step up because just we didn't really show a lot of progression, I would say, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Our flaws were exposed, and we never really quite covered them up. I would have loved to have seen Tony Elliott been more creative with the tools he had at his disposal. And honestly, I just don't know if he knew what he was going to have each and every Saturday. Ngata was out, Frank Latson was out, and it just kept switching on and on. I think if he would have known that there was going to be a 3 or 4 game span where we weren't going to have these guys, for Ngata basically the entire year, can we get multiple running backs on the field at the same time? Can we get multiple tight ends, split out or something like that at the same time? What other ways to be creative? Because again, you look back at what Alabama's doing, like Alabama changed over the course of the last few years, being a defensive dominant team to just being able to spread it out. What Sarkisian did to get Devontae Smith in space, that's why they won a national championship, is because they found a playmaker. They're like, listen, no one else can touch this guy, and they got him off the line of scrimmage, moving around, and no one could even touch him in that national championship game. He went off for over 200 yards in the first half and didn't even play the second half. He could have broken every record in that game alone. And before we go on to the next question, there's been a lot of rumors about Tony Elliott being interviewed for that Tennessee job because the UCF AD who originally wanted Tony Elliott just moved to go take the Tennessee AD job. What are your thoughts about that? If Tony Elliott is offered the head coaching position at Tennessee, do you turn that down?
That's a tough decision, and I wouldn't want to be in his shoes to make that decision. But Tony Elliott's come out really all year and even late in the year saying, look, I'm staying. I am not interviewing at Auburn. I am not looking at a head coaching job. I am here, and I'm the offensive coordinator for Clemson. Again, I would not hold it against him to take that interview and even potentially leave. I get it. Specifically for offensive coordinators, that next step is the head coaching position, and Tennessee is a great program to do that. But taking him at his word, I truly believe that Dabo has built a culture here at Clemson where people don't want to leave. I mean, we have players that are seniors coming back for their 5th and 6th years now after COVID, and the coaches that we're losing are kind of the lower tiered position coaches or the strategy coaches that are going to take that next big step, and that's great for them, and that's what Dabo wants. But at the top, Dabo has really built this surrounding of teammates and coaches that are in Clemson for the long haul.
Well, those lower tier coaches who are not high on the totem pole, like, they have to leave because Brent Venables and Tony, they're not leaving. So there's not much progression for growth upwards.
Yeah.
When you're looking at Tony Elliott, I can't think of a much more dysfunctional program, especially with the recent recruiting violations. With inevitably, there's going to be sanctions handed down to Tennessee. Florida State's the only team that comes to mind, which is just a disastrous, toxic environment where with fan bases that are disillusioned on who they are today. But Florida State gets to play Wake Forest and Virginia every year. Tennessee has to play the likes of Alabama, and they're considered rivals. So if you're Tennessee, I get why you want Tony Elliott, because you want someone from a winning culture. You want someone with character, because the last coach, there's no mistakes about it, he blew the character portion, just destroyed it. When they're talking about like they were just handing recruits cash in like McDonald's bags, like not even being discreet, which I don't want to get into any sort of allegation, but he came from Alabama. Like I don't know where he got these things from, but it doesn't sound like they're being that discreet. Their recruiting rankings showed them surging up, and kind of reminds you back to Ole Miss a few years ago when their recruiting rankings shot up. Like, oh, well, I wonder what's happening there. Okay, well, there's fraud associated with it. So I would not be surprised if Tennessee does try to go after Tony Elliott hard, just because of the tangibles and the intangibles that he brings. They need someone to steady the ship, and I mean, who's better at doing that right now?
I don't know that there's anybody better at doing that. I mean, hell, you look at John Gruden in the NFL at Oakland and, or I guess Las Vegas now. He's pulling a lot of Clemson players because a lot of people outside of even the college football see this character and this culture that Dabo has built. And everybody wants a piece of that. They want that on their team. And any piece of Clemson that you can get will take a piece of that culture with them and hopefully harbor that somewhere else, which I think Dabo also loves. I mean, he loves the Jeff Scotts at USF and building that culture there. And that's great to see. And I would be honored for Tony Elliott to go there and try to bring that Clemson mentality to other programs, especially programs that have gone through this, violations and issues and things that you really shouldn't be doing. They kind of need that fresh blood and a different perspective.
Yeah, I didn't want to get too much off on a tangent, but it seems like every time we do a show, the breaking news comes out the day afterwards. So I assume Tony Elliott will either say he's not interested in the position or will accept it tomorrow. But we at least got to address it and talk about it right now while we can. Moving on to the last main piece that really sticks from this year, because it was outside the wins and losses column, but it was Trevor Lawrence not winning the Heisman. And you can argue right or wrong. He missed 2 games because of COVID, but arguably he's one of the greatest quarterbacks who have ever played in college football, and what he did for this season. But Trevor Lawrence not winning the Heisman, the third and final piece I really want to talk about. Just what are your thoughts on that?
I think one thing that everyone needs to remember is the Heisman really comes down to 3 things. It's the best player in 1 year, it's character, and it's stats. Obviously, Trevor has the character. You'd want to attach the Heisman Trophy to Trevor. Same thing with Deshaun Watson. Statistically, Trevor had a great year. And unfortunately, with COVID and everything that's going on, he missed 2 games. So stats specifically, he was a little bit less on stats, and we always sit people out in the second half when we're blowing teams out, which other teams don't do, which always hurts us in the stats column. But the biggest one is it's the best player of a certain year. And overall, Trevor Lawrence might be the best player to play college football ever. But this year, was he the best? And I think he was obviously invited. He was top 3. I think he finished second in the Heisman rankings. And honestly, I'm really excited that out of all the other players that were in that race, with Kyle Trask having the top stats, with Mac Jones having an amazing year, I'm super excited that Devontae Smith won the Heisman. He's a wide receiver. It's been a very long time since a position player outside the quarterback has won the Heisman. You watched his speech, he has that character. He obviously had the stats. No one can guard him, especially when you put linebackers guarding him. I don't know why they did that. But I think it comes down to those 3 things. Yes.
Devontae Smith, I believe, Devontae Smith was the most electric player in college football. No one can argue that. I think he was the most valuable player on his team, because if Mac Jones goes down, the backup quarterback, I think he's from California, maybe named Bryce Young. He was the number 1 overall recruit, even beating out DJ as the number 1 quarterback recruit from previous class. Everyone expected him to come in and get the job, and Mac Jones was the one who actually ended up getting it. So I believe if you take Mac Jones out, I still don't think they win the national championship. But you take Jalen Waddle out, and it was just Devontae Smith. I mean, he single-handedly wrecked teams. And again, if you take Najee Harris out, grab one of the other 5-star running backs you have behind that offensive line, you'll be just fine, right? I was very happy that Trevor Lawrence finished second in the voting and first among quarterbacks. That means there's a lot of people who I believe for the first time looked at it, and I think it's just because of the COVID year, looked at it and was like, I believe this is more about who you think the best player is, and that's why Trevor Lawrence got a lot of love there at the end, above Kyle Trask and above Mac Jones. Do I think Devontae Smith is going to light things up the next level? No, I think he'll be a great wide receiver, but he was considered the fourth best wide receiver on his team, last year, and behind Jalen Waddle, Jared Jeudy, and Henry Ruggs. So I think he'll be a top 10 pick. I think he'll do well. I expect greater things out of Trevor Lawrence, but honestly, the amount of people who win the Heisman and go on doing great things in the NFL, that's a short list. But it would have been great to have it. But maybe DJ's our best chance to get a Heisman runner now.
It's so hard because it is that 1 year, and it's the 1 year look at, and there's so many people voting. But I want to say the one thing that Trevor did, and I hope did, by finishing second, was it made me feel that more voters were truly looking at the resume, truly watching the games, and kind of really figuring out who is the best player. And it's not just stats, and it's not just who's on TV on prime time at night. So I think that added a lot. And the one unique thing to Trevor, I think, and kind of what I don't like about him not winning, was the team that he had around him. I mean, his wide receivers, we talked about it. Nagata, really out all year. Justin Ross didn't play all year. Powell, who was a bench player a couple of years ago, had the year of his career, and hopefully will catapult him into the NFL because he deserves it. He was a huge help to Clemson this year. But again, not a tall guy, not a big guy, not incredibly fast, not a Devontae Smith fast. Amari Rodgers, amazing in the slot. But all young guys. I mean, there's E.J. Williams. I mean, Frank Latson missed half the year. So what Trevor was able to do, I think he had his best QBR this year out of all years that he's played. With the talent that he had around him, just talks to how amazing he is. And I think we'll see it at the next level.
Yeah, and one last thing on that is, like, when you look at the other quarterbacks who were in contention for the Heisman, they all had that dynamic playmaker. And for Florida and Kyle Trask, it was Kyle Pitts. Yep. And they lost. Florida lost to LSU there at the end. It's because Kyle Pitts did not play in that game. Florida got destroyed in the bowl game. One, because they were talking too much smack, but also because Kyle Pitts had already declared for the NFL and didn't play that game. So you saw, like, when a quarterback like Kyle Trask, who's nowhere near even Trevor Lawrence, but like when he did not have a dynamic playmaker who was able to really be a matchup nightmare, they struggled. Mac Jones, we never saw him without Devontae Smith, besides maybe the second half against Ohio State, which is when they didn't really score a lot of points. I get that you're up, so I can't really make that good of an argument. But playmakers help elevate your quarterback. Very appreciative for the playmakers that stepped up for Clemson this year, but next year, we'll have even more, which brings me into, I guess, my next question. You're done with 2020. Actually, before we do that, I want to go over the goals that Dabo has each year. And so just so that the Clemson fans can understand that winning the national championship is not a goal for Dabo and the team. It is simply this. It's one, win the opener, which is we did that. Two is win the division. There weren't really divisions this year, but we made it to the ACC championship game, so I don't know, maybe we won our division. Win the state championship. We did that by existing and not being a dumpster fire that South Carolina is, but South Carolina did win by getting Shane Beamer. I think he's a great coach. Win the conference. So for the sixth straight year, which is astounding, we won the conference, and then win the bowl game, which we weren't able to do, but 4 out of 5 of these, we did do those. If we would have won against Ohio State, it would have been probably more of a successful year to have lost to Alabama. But 4 out of 5 for the goals for the year, not half bad, right?
And I go back to the fact that we were 10-2 this year with 2 losses to the number 4 team, which we avenged in the ACC championship, and the number 2 team that lost the national championship to Alabama. I mean, that's a pretty incredible year to finish 3rd in the country with everything that's going on with a young team. Kudos to Clemson. Super happy with our year.
Right. So now let's look at next year, because I kind of feel like this year was kind of like how Alabama felt last year. Alabama missed out on the college football playoff. LSU looked to have surpassed, Clemson looked to have surpassed Alabama. They were losing a once-in-a-generation quarterback and Tua. They were losing their 2 wide receivers. presumably more people on defense, and they were in a rebuild mode, which we know Alabama doesn't rebuild, they reload. But they were supposed to have a freshman quarterback starting this year. They were supposed to have a little more inexperienced wide receivers, and yet they come out and absolutely reassert their dominance behind the face of new playmakers on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. So fast forwarding, is Clemson better next year without Trevor Lawrence and without Travis Etienne?
Yes. I think Clemson is better next year.
Wow.
I think that we have some things to work through, specifically on the defensive side, but bringing back 11 starters is huge. I think Brent Venables is the kind of guy that he probably wakes up with nightmares about that Ohio State game, and I can't imagine him not fixing whatever those mistakes were, whether it was game planning or whether it was truly just personnel not being athletic enough or not knowing the system well enough, or Skalski being injured and your main play caller on defense is not on the field. A lot of different things that go into it, but the big question mark for me is going to be who replaces Etienne. I think we've got like 5 playmakers right now at running back, with more players coming in. Will Shipley be the next Christian McCaffrey? I don't know, and that's the big question mark on me, is the running backs and then the offensive line getting better. I think Clemson can be better next year. I think they will be better next year, but it's still going to be tough to win the national championship. I don't know if we do it, but I think we're still in the running for it.
Right. And now, Alabama and Ohio State, the two other contenders, they're losing their quarterbacks. They're losing Chris Olave from Ohio State is coming back, but Alabama's going to be gutted on both sides of the ball again. And so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, having 11 starters back, having a top 5 recruiting class coming in, and seeing some players that weren't necessarily starters this year but grow in the roles. Trenton Simpson, I'm incredibly excited to see what he does next year and how they are creative with him to get him on the field. He's just a super athletic, has a great nose for the ball. Love seeing him play. And then you mentioned the running backs for next year. I mean, just think about what the offense can look like with DJ Uiagalelei. Let's say you have Lynn J. Dixon at running back, but Shipley, you have to get on the field. You cannot just say because he's second or third string running back, he doesn't see the field. You have to get him out there almost like a Hunter Renfrow, some sort of slot position, especially on third downs. And then you have Ross, you have Ngata, you have Latson. It has the opportunity to be an absolutely explosive offense. Let's see how long it takes them to click into gel. But with you having a returning defense, an extra year in the offseason in this weight program for some of those younger players, those younger 5-stars like Brzee and Murphy, who were excellent. They just need another year of getting bigger. And then you have this offense of what I think it could be. As crazy it is, next year might really be bigger. It might be better. You're right on that one, I think.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see how this coaching staff really implants this team with this young talent. And I think the hardest decision is going to be which young talent becomes the premier talent. I mean, you talk about the running backs. Yeah, Lynn J, incredible. Will Shipley's coming in. Oh, by the way, Kobe Pace is still there. Oh, by the way, Malusi's still there. Oh, by the way, Richard's coming back. There's going to be 6 or 7 running backs, which is crazy. So I'm sure we're going to lose some to transfers and whatnot. But we need to find a way to get these young athletes converted into premier athletes that move this program further. They're all there. You mentioned them all. We'll throw in Booth and a bunch of these other guys that are there. And it's all there for the making. Can the Clemson coaches do it? I think that they can. I think all the talent in the world is there. I pray to anything and everything that next year is normal and that we can get past this time of COVID and that this vaccination works. And we're hopefully through this towards fall season when we kick off and we can get back to normal, because Clemson's going against Georgia right here, my hometown of Charlotte. And I'm so excited about it because I'm going to buy tickets and I'm going to be there.
Man, you want COVID to disappear just so you can finally marry that fiance of yours and keep pushing it back. I feel like that's a priority for you right now. It's like, can COVID just end just so we can have a normal wedding at this point in time instead of keep pushing it back?
Hey, 2022 sounds good. Why not? We'll just keep every next year is always great.
Yeah, Amelia's patient. It'll be fine. But I I was looking back over some of the stats from this year. I was like, well, we would be remiss if we did not remind what I think is the most important stat from this year. And it was a victory for Clemson, and more specifically Travis Etienne breaking the rushing yardage record formerly held by the NC State great. So him getting that record on what was arguably a down year for Travis Etienne, still I think the best running back in this class, and many people have it that way between him and Najee Harris. But him having that record, being in the record book, coming back and also getting his degree, I don't think it should be considered a pitfall that he came back. I think he did end up elevating his draft position because he showed a greater effort in in pass blocking, greater ability with his hands, and now he has a record and a diploma that no one can take away from him. So I think those are a huge win that I did not want to overlook before we did go ahead and sign off.
Yeah, I'm super proud of this year's team. I'm super proud of Clemson and just the way that we continue to handle our program and our culture and bringing these kids along. I mean, Dabo's big thing has always been about elevating these kids. I mean, even with the social injustice, no matter how Dabo felt about it, he was like, if these kids feel like that's important to them, go for it. If they want to wear different names on the back of their jerseys like equality, go for it. They have their own voice. I want them to grow as men. I want them to get their degree. And football is secondary. It's a sport, and he loves it to death. But to him, it's about molding and shaping the young men of this country and his college, and setting them up for future successes, whatever that may be, whether it's in football or outside of football, because he knows that 90% of them, 98% of them aren't going to the NFL. And even if they go to the NFL careers only go to your 35, 40 if you're lucky. There's still a whole lifetime after that. And making these kids into the best kids that they can be is huge for Dabo, and I applaud him for that.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady's the greatest of all time, and he's 43 years old, so it's like max. I mean, you can possibly ever get to is that long in the NFL. Tune in next week because we're going to be talking about our recruiting class and breaking down every single member of the recruiting class in there and just what they can bring to this team next year that we do think is going to be better even than the team we had this year, which is still just crazy to say. A lot could happen between now and then, between commitments and where's different coaches going to be going, who we're going to pick up. But tune in next week. Like, subscribe. That always helps us out. We appreciate it so much. Eric, you got anything to add?
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us through 2020, through this crazy time. Hey, we've discussed it, Derek and I. We're really looking forward to moving forward with this Tiger Football Talk. We're going to be bringing you new things this year. We're going to, like he said, we're going to break down the recruits coming up. We're going to break down the spring game. We're going to break down the coaching. And we even might try to kick off a podcast. So stick with us. 2021 is going to be exciting for everything. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.